Bonjour et bienvenue à ce webinaire ouvert à tous. Je m'appelle Axel Fossier, je travaille au Cercle des langues dans l'équipe communication et je suis avec Cecilia, qui est professeure native au Cercle des langues et qui va animer ce soir ce premier webinaire. Dites-moi si vous nous entendez. Si c'est la première fois que vous utilisez Livestorm, sur la droite, il y a un espace chat. Voilà, il y a Lucas qui dit bonjour tout le monde. Alors, est-ce que vous nous entendez? Bonjour à tous. Bonjour Alexandra. Lucas. Bonjour Evelyne. Hello everyone. Can you hear us? Super. Bon, c'est génial. Vous nous entendez. Alors, du coup, avant de commencer, pour ceux qui ne nous connaissent pas, Cecilia est professeure native au Cercle des langues. Le Cercle des langues, c'est une école d'anglais en ligne pour les adultes qui propose des formations CPF, donc pour suivre des formations avec 0 € de reste à charge pour vous. Donc, ça peut être très intéressant en fonction de votre situation. Et nous proposons des formations d'anglais sur mesure en fonction de vos objectifs, de votre niveau et de votre budget. Voilà. Donc, sans plus tarder, je vais laisser la place à Cecilia. Mais juste au début, voilà, je voulais vous expliquer, comme c'est le premier webinaire qu'on fait avec Livestorm, je voulais vous expliquer, si vous ne connaissez pas encore l'outil, comment ça marche. Donc, voilà, vous verrez en fait sur cet écran exactement la même chose que ce qu'on projetait pendant nos YouTube Live, c'est-à-dire Cecilia menait une leçon de 30 minutes gratuite et en direct sur des thèmes business. Et il y a à côté un chat, donc sur la droite de votre écran, un chat dans lequel vous pouvez interagir, réagir. Et il y a aussi un onglet questions dans lequel Cecilia vous posera éventuellement des questions et dans lequel vous pouvez lui répondre directement. Ce webinaire est enregistré. Seulement la vidéo est enregistrée, la vidéo et le son. Et dès demain, nous republierons du coup le replay de ce webinaire sur notre chaîne YouTube. Donc voilà, YouTube, ça permet maintenant seulement de revisionner les webinaires, mais ça ne permet pas de les suivre en direct, comme c'était le cas auparavant. Donc pour les prochains webinaires qui seront à la même heure, chaque semaine, donc le mardi à 19 h, il faudra rejoindre l'événement Livestorm. Et de toute façon, vous recevrez la newsletter, vous verrez les messages sur le groupe Facebook pour nos élèves, et donc il ne devrait pas y avoir de souci. Donc, sans plus tarder, je laisse la place à Cecilia pour ce super premier webinaire sur comment réussir un entretien d'embauche en anglais et j'espère que vous prendrez beaucoup de plaisir à l'écouter. Merci à tous, bon webinaire.
So, hello everyone. As Axel mentioned, today we are going to be covering an all-important business English topic, which is how to ace a job interview. And if you're here today, it means you're not yet feeling confident to undertake a job interview in English. Now, job interviews are daunting even in your own language. You could be given any question on the spot and you need to come up with a perfect answer. And it's difficult even in your own language, so it's even more complicated when you're trying to do it in a second language, in English. So that's why we're here to help you today. Have any of you had any experiences of partaking in a job interview in English? Do you have any particular challenges you might have faced while you were taking part in a job interview in English? If so, please do let me know in the chat because, of course, we are here to help. We're going to be dividing our lesson into 4 parts today. So first, we'll be looking at expressing your motivations, why you want a job. In part 2, we'll be looking at proving your value. In part 3, we'll be looking at asking the right questions. And then finally, in part 4, we will be testing your knowledge. So I hope you are all listening. So let's get going. So, to start with, let's look at expressing your motivations. It's pretty unlikely you're going to get through a job interview without being asked why you want to work at the company, or maybe what attracted you to this particular role. And in order to do this, you need to be able to talk about the job role or talk about the company and maybe give some detail as to how it fits in with your wider goals. So the type of question that you might be asked is, what drew you to our company? Or why do you want to work with us? And these questions are asking about your motivation, why you chose that company. So how do we answer this sort of question? Well, of course, the answer you give is going to depend on the particular role, and it's always important that you do your research. But there are some aspects that are more general about particular jobs, particular companies that you can use to talk about. So for describing certain qualities of a company, you might like to talk about a company's work culture. And a company's work culture is the sort of environment that they cultivate for their employees, how people interact with one another, the expectations, and if a job has a very nice, or a company has a very nice work culture. Of course, this is a great attribute because you're going to have to spend a lot of your time there if you're working. Next, you might like to talk about their approach. So their approach to the industry or their approach to a particular problem. And an approach is their way of doing things. So you might like perhaps the way that they solve problems or the way that they take care of their employees. Next, you might like a company's values. And you can use the word align if you want to say that a company's values are similar to yours. Values being the things that they find important, the things that they focus on, and perhaps their ethics. Then you can say your company values align with mine, which means that the company's values are the same as or similar to yours. Now you might want to talk about a company's mission. So you say, I am passionate about your mission. And their mission, a company's mission, is what they're trying to achieve, their ultimate goal. So for instance, their mission might be to make sure everyone in France has access to English lessons, or their mission might be to make sure that everyone in a certain country has access to free water, or something like that. A mission is an ultimate goal. And finally, you might like to talk about a company's vision. Now, a vision is very much looking forward to the future. It's thinking about what do they see the future looking like. So perhaps that means that they see the future looking like free water for everyone, something like that. A vision is very much that long-term goal. And so next, we're going to have a look at some expressions you can use to talk about, for instance, a approach or why you want to work for a certain company. So first of all, you might like to say, I've always. So if someone asked, what drew you to this company? You can say, for instance, let's say it's an English language teaching company like Cercle des Langues. You can say, I've always been interested in languages, which shows that you are committed and invested in what the company does, because this is an interest you have had for a very long time, which shows, of course, that you are serious about what the company does. Then you might also like to use the phrase, I believe. And this you can use to introduce something that you think you'd be good at. So you can say, I believe I would be really great at this role, or I believe that what you're doing is interesting. I believe just is a way of emphasizing what you think about something, your feeling about something. Now, next up, you could say, I enjoy. And enjoy, of course, is a verb to talk about something you like doing. So if a company is a teaching company, it makes sense for you to say, I really enjoy teaching, and that's why I would like to work with you. And this is a phrase I have already used a little bit, I would like to. This is obviously talking about the future, saying what you would like to do in the future. And another phrase you can use to project a little bit into the future and say what you would like to do is to use the phrase, I'm looking for an opportunity to. So this is talking about perhaps something more specific you might be able to do in a particular role. So some of the things you might be looking for an opportunity to in a role might be to challenge yourself. And to challenge yourself is to give yourself a task that might be a little bit difficult. But of course, only through challenging yourself can you improve. And if you say you want to challenge yourself, that will show the interviewer that you are ambitious and that you care about improvement and you are willing to do more, go outside of your comfort zone. Go outside of your comfort zone. And then, of course, to learn, that means to gain more knowledge, gain more information. So if you are looking for an opportunity to learn, obviously people are always learning. So it's great for an interviewer to see that you are interested in this. Next, the word apply. So apply has a few different meanings. Of course, you can use apply to say apply for a job. But in this case, you might like to say, for instance, you have studied languages and you are now looking for an opportunity to apply your studies. It means to put them into practice and really make use of them. And finally, progress towards. So this is a phrase we can use a little bit more if we're talking about the long-term goals, maybe our long-term career goals. You can say, I'm looking for an opportunity to progress towards a managerial role. So that's identifying what you would like to achieve and how you are going to do it, how the role you are currently applying to fits into your longer term goals. So next, we're going to have a look at proving your value. So of course, an interview is your moment to shine and show the interviewer why you deserve the job. And so your value is what you can bring to the company. So the sort of questions that they might ask to get you to tell you about your value might be, what could you bring to the team? So this is asking, what skills do you have that you will bring to the team and make the team even stronger? They might also ask, what makes you a good fit for this role? Now, a good fit means someone who is going to do a great job, has all the necessary skills to carry out the role effectively. And finally, they might ask you to tell me about a time when you did something in particular. So it might be, tell me about a time when you led a team. And we will come back to this particular question a little bit later. But first of all, we will have a look at telling someone about your experience and your qualifications. So for starters, if you want to talk about your education, you can say, I graduated from. So if you want to say, and then you would say the university you went to. So you could say, I graduated from Cambridge University. And that would let your interviewer know about your educational experience. Then you might also like to say, I worked for. This is about your previous work experience, and you would then follow this phrase with a company. So I worked for Cercle des Langues for 5 years. And finally, if you want to talk about your experience, of course, lots of employers are looking for experience because it shows that you're going to be able to do the job again if you've already had practice doing it before. So you can say, I have experience in tech, I have experience in the e-commerce industry. You can fill it in with any sort of skill or noun or industry that you would like to. So next, of course, you are going to want to talk about your particular strengths, your attributes. So an attribute is a quality about you. So for starters, you can say, I am enthusiastic. Enthusiastic means you're always ready to take part in something. You're always ready to put all of your effort into something, and you can get excited about particular tasks. And then if you say that you are proactive, this is something that employers really like to see because proactivity means that you are able to make decisions on your own. If you see something needs to be done, you will be the person who will get up and do it. Next is to say you are passionate. So I mentioned passionate earlier, but passionate is when you're very invested in something, you're very interested in something. So of course, when employers are looking for passion, they're looking They're looking for someone who really cares about the work. Next, we have flexible. So being flexible means you are able to change the way you work or change your behavior or change your skills based on a particular situation you are faced with. And of course, if you're applying for a role which might have lots of different elements to it, then being flexible means you will be able to fit all of them. Next up, we have a team player. Now, a team player is someone who is really committed to and will always take part in and contribute to group activities or group tasks. They care about other people and they want other people to succeed as well as them, and they're willing to put in work to make sure that others succeed. Now, just a couple more slightly more complex expressions. So this is idiomatic to say to go the extra mile. If you are willing to go the extra mile, this means you are willing to go or put in more effort than is perhaps expected. You're willing to put in more effort. Next, think outside the box. I like this phrase, but think outside the box means to have, you're able to think about things in a new, interesting way. You maybe have a slightly different perspective to what other people have. Next, we have results driven. So someone who is results driven. Results, of course, are the end product of a particular action. And so if you're results driven, that means you care about looking forward to see what the result of a particular action or a particular decision is going to be, which is great because obviously employers want results. And finally, detail orientated. So if someone's detail orientated, this means they pay close attention to detail. And of course, this means that hopefully there will be few mistakes. So this is another really great attribute to mention to an interviewer. And of course, it's great to tell the interviewer that you have a skill, as I've just shown you with some particular phrases or words, but it's often even better to give them a really concrete example. So this comes back to the tell me about a time when you, which I mentioned earlier, that particular question, which invites the interviewee to give some evidence, context-based evidence for a particular skill. And so I am not sure if any of you have ever heard of something called the STAR method. You can let me know in the chat if you've heard of the STAR method, or perhaps it is a method you've used yourself in a job interview. But STAR is an acronym. It stands for situation, task, action, and result. And this is a popular way to give answers in a job interview that really show in practice examples of your skills. So I have given you some expressions particular to each stage of the STAR method. So we will start with situation. So in the situation, you are trying to set the scene, give a little bit of an introduction to what happened. So to start, you might like to say, in my previous role. So previous is the one before, the one now, and of course your role, your job role. So this means in my last job, in my previous role, and then you can go on to give a little bit more detail on the particular situation. You might also like to use once. This, of course, maybe brings to mind the beginning of a fairy tale or a story. Once is a very common way to start a story. And of course, this is a nice way to introduce what you're going to say, the introduction. And you also might like to base your situation in a time period. So you might say last month or last year or last week, depending on how recent the situation you were in was. And then next for the T, we have task. So the task is the particular task that you needed to do at that time. And of course, this is introducing the problem that you needed to solve, perhaps, or the task you needed to do. So one phrase we can use is to say, as the, and then a particular job role. So this is a way to introduce your job role. And then you could say, I needed to, which introduces what your responsibility was in that particular moment. So you might like to say, as the pedagogy manager, I needed to make sure that lessons were running smoothly. That I am a pedagogy manager and making sure it was my responsibility to make sure that lessons were running smoothly. And then, of course, I was responsible for means the same thing. I needed to, I was responsible for, talking about your responsibility. And if you can follow I was responsible for with a noun. So you can say, I was responsible for the whole group of teachers, or you can use a noun verb form, the ing form. So you could say, I was responsible for hiring teachers. Okay. And then finally, talking about a target. So a target is a defined goal that needs to be achieved. So you might like to say, my target was to hire 10 teachers by the end of the month, for instance. So then the next section is the action section. Now, of course, this is the moment where you get to shine, you get to say what you did that really changed things for in your role or for your company. And in this stage, it's very important you use I. So that just shows that you were the person who had the strong role in making the decisions. So you can lay out, perhaps you did more than one thing, so you want to order your actions. So you can start by saying, as I just did, you can say, I started by, and you could say, I started by creating a new spreadsheet for all of my employees. That might be the thing you did first, but to say you started by means it was the first action you did. If you then want to introduce another action that followed this first action, you can say next. So next, I sent an email to all of our clients, and that just introduces the second action. You can then use next for the third, the fourth. Next can keep on going. Then in terms of the particular actions you might have done, you might have created something. So you can say, I created a new platform for all of our students to speak on. So to create is to bring something into existence. And then similarly, set up. Set up again is to create something that can, but you might like to use it more for something that you have to put into action. So you can say, like, I set up a group, I set up a lesson, something that's a bit more action based, or even maybe something that's based in technology, like I set up a new app would be a nice way to use set up. So then next we can move on to results. And of course, the results section is the very important section because this shows an employer exactly what your actions did. So first of all, you can say by. By introduces exactly what you did. So by setting up a new app, I was able to do something else. And then the I was able to is the result. But the by just introduces what it was that brought about the result. And then again, to introduce a result, you can start by saying as a result of. So as a result of my new app, we gained 15 more customers, let's say. 15 is not that many, but it'll do. And then these two phrases, so I managed to and I was able to, these are pretty much synonymous. They mean the same thing. It just shows what you managed to do, the specific result. So I managed to grow our company. Grow down here, of course, means to increase in size. So grow and increase might be used in quite similar situations. And then the opposite of increase is to reduce. So this is to make smaller. And finally, maybe the result of your actions was to improve something. And to improve means to make something better. So now we'll be moving on to part 3, which is asking the right questions. So this is where the situation changes. Of course, during the interview, you have been being asked all the questions, but then at the end, it's up to you to ask a few questions to the interviewer. And of course, asking questions is a very important part of the interview process, as it really shows the interviewer that you are interested and invested enough in the role to want to find out more. And being able to ask specific questions shows you have a clear understanding of the role and of the company. So when it gets to the end, the interviewer will probably ask you, do you have any questions? And the particular things you might like to ask questions about, or words you might like to include in your questions. For starters, you might like to ask about the scope of something. So that means the range of something. So the scope of work, the scope of possibility to do something. It just means the range. Next, you might like to ask about training programs. So training is, of course, being able to gain more skills. And so if a company has a training program, that's a really important thing for you to know, because perhaps you don't want to keep, well, not perhaps, I'm sure you don't want to stop learning. So having training programs means you'll be able to continue your learning. Then you might also like to ask about possibilities of development. So development or progression means moving forward, moving maybe upwards. So perhaps this means taking on more responsibilities or even starting to lead a team. You might also like to ask about a typical day at work. So this is a standard day. It just will give you an idea of the types of things that someone who works at the company does. You might also like to ask about projects. So a project is a particular body of work that the company might be working on. Next, you might like to ask about any challenges. So of course, challenge was a word we mentioned earlier, but it means a difficulty, something that has been difficult, but it's not in a negative way. Of course, looking for a challenge just means then looking for a solution, and it's very satisfying and rewarding to find a solution to a challenging problem. And then you might like to ask about the long term. So we have the short term and the long term. The long term is very far away in the future, and the short term is close in the future. So if I was thinking about the long term, that's maybe in 10 years. And for the short term, maybe that is 2 years. And of course, as much as an interview is about you trying to impress the interviewer, you want to make sure that the company is somewhere you want to work. So you might like to ask them, what sets you apart? So to set apart is making them different. It makes them better than other companies. You can say, what sets you apart from your competitors, for instance. And finally, a couple of question phrases. So what are is a way to introduce the question to find out the options for something. So for instance, what are the opportunities for progress in this company? You might like to say, what sort of? This is to find out the exact quality of whatever you're asking about. So what sort of projects, what type of projects are you working on at the moment? Is there? Are there? This is a way of finding out about the existence of something. So are there any training programs available for employees? Can you tell me? This is a nice way to introduce a question, quite polite. Of course, you'd like to be polite during an interview. So can you tell me a bit more about a typical workday? And then finally, what is the next step? So this, you've got to the end of the interview, and now you want to find out, is there another interview? What do you need to do next? And finally, in terms of tying up the interview, once the interviewer has asked you all their questions, you've asked all your questions, here are some phrases, some sentences you can use to politely tie up. So you can say, I think that is everything. Once you've asked all your questions, I have no more questions. And similarly, that is all for the moment also means I have no more questions. Of course, you want to be very polite and show your gratitude for your interview. So you can say thank you for your time. Thank you, of course, you're grateful that the interviewer has taken the time to interview you. And finally, can say I look forward to hearing from you. So this is again thinking a little bit in the future that you're expecting them to contact you again to find out the results of the interview. And I look forward to, this is just a very friendly and enthusiastic way to say that you're excited about something that's going to happen. So now we are going to have a short quiz on what we've learned. So I hope you have been listening. So the questions will come up on here, and then I will also post the questions in the questions tab. So please click on the questions tab in the live store so that you can respond to the question. So to start with, what is the expression that we use to mean putting in more effort than is expected? Please go ahead and type your response in the questions section of the live storm. Can anyone remember what is the expression we use to mean putting in more effort than is expected? So yes, make sure you click brilliant. Oh, okay. Does anyone have an idea of what the expression we use to mean putting in more effort than is expected is? I'll give you a little clue. It's got something to do with distance. Yes, Evelyn, thank you. Brilliant. To go the extra mile. So if you are putting in more effort than is expected, you are going the extra mile. So my next question is, what is a word we can use to describe someone who contributes to group tasks? I'll post it again in the questions tab. So do click on there if you'd like to give your response. So Sandrine, thank you for your answer. It's not quite proactive in this case. Yes, Akil, thank you. So someone who is willing to contribute to group tasks and activities is a team player. And the final question, can you choose the correct sentence? Oh, accidentally gave away the answer there. Hopefully none of you saw that. So again, I will post this. Which of these is the correct way of saying this sentence? So do you say, I started by call my team for a meeting? Do you say, I started by calling my team in for a meeting? Or I started by to call my team for a meeting? Brilliant. So we've got a lot of answers. Number two. So it is indeed, I started by calling my team in for a meeting with that ing form. Excellent. So that brings us to the end of our webinar. Thank you very much for coming, all of you. I hope you have enjoyed and I hope you have learned something new. Si ce webinaire vous a plu et que vous souhaitez approfondir vos pratiques de l'anglais, n'hésitez pas à faire une demande d'information sur notre site Internet. Nous serons heureux de vous présenter nos formations en détail et même de vous proposer un test de niveau gratuit à l'oral avec un de nos professeurs. So thank you again for coming, and I hope to see you next week at the same time. Bye bye.